we have the words, I am. And today we're going to talk about Jesus and how he is the light of the world. But before we get to today's message, I have a few questions or slash jokes. If you were at camp, Spencer and I, during times where we're waiting on something that's kind of a fill-in gap, we come up with jokes, and they aren't very good. So I may give you a few today that isn't very good, so just laugh, enjoy them. Okay? How many evolutionists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but it'll take 1,000,000 years. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to be the one that wants to change. How many real men does it take to change a light bulb? None, because real men aren't scared of the dark. Come on. Well. How many football players does it take to change a light bulb? It takes the whole team, but they get a semester's credit for it. Okay? All right. How many people in Florida does it take to change a light bulb? I don't know. They're still counting. All right. So, light bulbs. Jesus said, I am the light. So, as we go in the 9th chapter of John, Jesus reveals an I am statement. And if we go through the whole book of John, we will find that he has 7 I am statements. So, in John chapter 9, before John chapter 9, we've already seen the feeding of the 5,000. We have had the healing of the blind man. And we've already seen Jesus say the first I am, which is, I am the bread of the life. So in chapter 9, we are going to run in the verse, I am the light of the world. And that's verse 5. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. But that's not actually the first time he says that I am the light of the world. If we go back to chapter 8, verse 12, he says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Will have the light of life. So a little boy forgot his Sunday school presentation, and his mother was in the first row. And I mean, a lot of us do this when we have kids in presentations, right? We try to help them out by, come on, this is what it is. So his memory was completely blank. And the mother's trying to help him out, try to say, I am the light of the world. Try to whisper it to him. And he still couldn't make it out, so she scooted up a little bit more and said, I am the light of the world. So the little boy was proud and confident, and he said his line, my mother is the light of the world. Right? Well, actually, Jesus tells us he is the light of the world. But what is he saying? What is he revealing about himself that we can get, that we can take from this statement? If we go back to John chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. In the beginning was the Word, and in the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not understand it. So the purpose of Jesus' life was that his life is what illuminates our lives. Okay? His life gives us the ability to see and navigate through our own lives. Many sermons ago, I said a joke about a battleship that was about to run into the lighthouse. Does anybody remember that? Okay, Tom's the only one. He's the only one that listens to me. Well, anyway, this battleship is approaching a light, and he sends a signal that says, move 20 degrees. You know, I'm right in front of you, and the other light shines back and says, no, you move 20 degrees. Is it getting familiar now? No? Okay, I'll keep going. And then the battleship says, no, you move 20 degrees, I'm a battleship. And then the light sends back, says, I'm a lighthouse, you make the call. Okay? So, the light of man, according to God, is the life of Christ. It is the lighthouse. Okay? It is fixed, it is secured, it is unchanging, and it's unwavering. It isn't like a spotlight where we can just adjust to see where we want to go. It is the life of Christ that was sent to earth, that lived for 3 decades, that died on a cross, that rose from the dead, and ascended to the Father. And now is the lighthouse so that we may be guided in our life. See, and then the end of that verse in verse 4, it says, darkness does not comprehend light. Darkness does not comprehend light. How many of us get a bunch of chain emails and letters? You know, my email's full of the junk stuff, right? But so with all that going out and a bunch of urban legend stories and things like that, it's almost impossible to believe some stories. Well, I received one, and it's compelling nonetheless. So we'll go from there. A university professor at a well-known higher institution challenges students with this question: did God create everything? One student bravely replied, well, yes, he did. And then the professor answered, if God created everything, then God created evil. And since evil exists, and according to the principle that our works defines who we are, then we can assume God is evil. The student became quiet and didn't answer anymore, so that the professor, quite pleased with himself, boasted to his students that he had proven once again that the Christian faith was just a myth. So another student raised his hand and he said, Professor, can I ask you a question? Of course. So the student stood up and asked, Professor, does cold exist? What kind of question is this? We all know that cold exists. But the young man replied, in fact, cold does not exist. According to the law of physics, what we consider cold is reality just the absence of heat. So absolute zero, which is negative 460 degrees Fahrenheit, is the total absence of heat. So cold does not exist. Man has created this word to describe the absence of heat. The student continued, Professor, does darkness exist? The professor responded, of course it does. And the student replied once again, actually you're wrong, because darkness doesn't exist either. Darkness is in reality the absence of light. Light we can study, but darkness we cannot. A simple ray of light can break into a world of darkness and illuminate it. But how dark can a space get? You measure that by the amount of light present, right? So, darkness is again a term man created to represent the absence of light. So finally, the young man had one more question for the professor. Sir, does evil exist? Now, uncertain where the student was going, the professor responded with, of course, we've already said this. We see it every day. We see it in the daily examples of our own lives. The multitude of crime, violence, everywhere in the world we see evil. So the student replied with this, Sir, evil does not exist. Or at least it does not exist unto itself. Evil is simply the absence of God. It is just like darkness and cold, a word that man has created to describe the absence of God. So evil is just a result of what happens when a man doesn't have God in his life. It's just like cold when there's no heat, or just like the darkness when there's no light. So the professor sat down defeated. And that young student's name was Albert Einstein. You see, darkness does not comprehend the light because the two cannot mix. All right? I want us to think about it. How do you mix light and darkness? You just can't do it. If you bring light into the darkness, then it's no longer dark. Right? So, I want us to look at another professor. And this professor is Jesus. And the student is a man named Nicodemus. And it follows right after one of the greatest and most famous Bible verses of all time, is John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through Him. Whoever believes in Him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe in the name of God's one and only Son. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but men loved darkness instead of light, because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what he has done has been done through God. See, darkness does not comprehend light. Or a better way of saying it is, darkness does not want to comprehend light. Why? Because if they know that the light will expose it and will eliminate it. You can't have darkness where you have light. And that brings us to John chapter 8. And we read it already this morning, but when he says them, he's talking about the scribes and the Pharisees. And the people in the crowd are all good, and they're ready for this stoning of the woman, the adulterous woman. Everyone knew that A plus B equals C. Adultery plus the law equals stoning. But they make the mistake of asking the light of the world, what should we do? They made the mistake of asking the light of the world, what should we do? And the light of the world exposes their darkness. In John chapter 8, verses 7 through 12. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, if any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until Jesus was left with the woman still standing. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you." Jesus declared, "Go on and leave your life of sin." This is what I want you to be sure and see. The church today often gets only half of that message. But catch all of what he says. Because the light of the world provides hope. The light of the world provides hope. Just like he did for that moment. Again, when Jesus turned and spoke to them, these people dropped their stones and they left. Jesus is alone with the woman, but there is some transition to verse 12 to 13, because then it goes on to talking about Jesus speaking to a crowd again, speaking to them, the Pharisees and the scribes. And verse 13 points to the fact. And what does Jesus tell them? He says, yes, you have sinned. You have. Yes, the light of my life exposes the darkness in yours. So you can't throw a stone. But guess what? You don't have to walk in darkness either. There's hope. You can have the light of life if you will just follow me. You can have the light of life if you will just follow me. You see, through the years, the church has specialized in the message of guilt, sin, shame. And the light that is Jesus doesn't overlook the wrongs and the sins of our lives, but it does it offer the hope to walk in the light. You see, we get caught up into what we do. You know, God still sees that, but he says, there's hope. There's hope. You may have noticed that the transition of Jesus being the light of the world, him saying, I am the light of the world, then goes on to saying, us, the church, being the light of the world. Are we the light of the world? Well, it is biblical. And in John chapter 12, verse 35, it reads this. Then Jesus told them, you are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. The man who walks in the dark does not know where he is going. Put your trust in the light while you have it, so that you may become sons of light. So, yes, Jesus is the light of the world, but what is he to us? He is the ultimate teacher. He is the ultimate example. So we are supposed to walk into his footsteps. We are supposed to do as he did. And if he's the light of the world, we too should be the light of the world. And according to Rick Warren, there are two basic reasons people don't know Jesus Christ. One is that they have never met a Christian. Two, it is because they have met a Christian. I want you to think about that for a second. If you ask a whole bunch of people who aren't Christians why they aren't, many will answer with either one of those. They have never met a Christian, or they have met a Christian. So that makes me think of the story of where there's this stoplight, and there were two cars, one in front, one in back, and the person in front, the guy in front, didn't realize that the light turned green. So the woman behind her started to get really angry. No one here does that, right? When you get road rage. But anyway, the lady started honking her horn, hitting her dashboard, and saying all kinds of profanity, and was just irate because she couldn't get on through the stoplight. So by the time that the man realized that the light was green, it turned yellow and he went on through, but she got stopped at the red light. So because of that, she got mad again and started hitting the steering wheel and honking the horn. And next thing she knows, she hears a knock on her window. And it's a police officer. And he says, "Ma'am, I'd like for you to get out of the car." And without really knowing what's going on, she just steps on out. And the police officer puts her in cuffs and takes her straight to her car and takes her down to the station. She gets booked in, she gets her fingerprints photographed, all of these things without even having a clue of what she did wrong. So after a couple hours, the police officer approached the cell and opened up the door and said, "You can come with me." And she's escorted back to get her personal belongings, and there was the officer that pulled her over. And he said, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for the mistake. But you see, when I pulled up behind your car, while you were blowing your horn, screaming at this man, and then I noticed something. I noticed the Choose Life license plate holder. I noticed the What Would Jesus Do and Follow Me to Sunday School stickers on the back of your car. And the chrome plate Christian Fitch emblem on the trunk. So naturally, I just assumed that you stole this vehicle because of the way you were acting." I mean, how many of us are like that today? That we are a Christian, but man, sometimes we don't act like it. So how can we be the light of the world if we are saying one thing and doing another? Do you know any people in your life who aren't Christians because they have met one? Do you know people that are not Christians because they have met one? They have met someone who has charged them with being the son of the light, but hasn't expected or hasn't accepted that challenge. Or has been so busy penetrating the sins of the world with a little laser that they are too busy not to offer any help, too busy to not offer any encouragement or guidance. We're too busy sometimes to not come alongside the lost with a flashlight and say, "Hey, let me help you find your way. Let me help you find your way." See, Jesus never ignored the adulterous woman. He just offered her hope. He offered her the light of the world. Jesus didn't assume that since this man was blind, he was perfect. He just offered him hope. He offered him the light of the world. So let's drill this down to where you are sitting. One or two scenarios. You are trapped in this darkness. It might be an inappropriate relationship. It might be drugs. It might be alcohol. It might be depression, fear, constant anxiety. All you know for sure is that when you look into your soul, is that when you look into your life, all you see is darkness. If that's you, I have great news for you. Jesus, the light of the world, has passed his light to us here at First Christian Church. And we are ready to shine that light so that you don't have to be in a dark place anymore. We are willing to shine that light so that you don't have to think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? We are willing to shine the light to guide you along your way. And in just a moment, if that's your scenario, I'm going to give you a chance to step out into the light. But then the scenario number 2. You have been in charge of being the light in your workplace. You have been in charge of being the light at your home, at your school, in your neighborhood. But you have acted more like the woman behind the steering wheel than the light of the world. Your testimony and lifestyle has been anything but light. Again, I have great news for you. Jesus is ready to relight your candle, recharge your batteries, or turn that light switch on back for you. However you want to look at it, he wants to come in your life. He wants to give you forgiveness and grace. And he wants to offer you the opportunity to once again be light in a dark and dying world. So this morning, as we come to the time of invitation, are you scenario 1 or scenario 2? If your life, all you can see is darkness, Jesus is right here saying, come here. I am the light of the world. I want to take you in. I want to guide you. I love you. Or if he says it that we are supposed to be the light of the world as well. If we are caught up in the worldly things and our attitudes and our selfish desires, and we're pushing people away into that darkness, it's time to change our attitudes and time to be the light of the world. So this morning, darkness isn't anything. Darkness isn't a word. It's just what we've made. Okay? The absence of light. Don't go out of here today with the absence of light. Jesus loves you. He wants to be the light of your world. Please stand as we sing our final song.